5 of the most hated prisoners in the UK. Number 5 is Imran Shahid, nicknamed Baldy. Baldy, 45, was the ringleader of a gang that stabbed and tortured innocent Chris, from Pollokshields, Glasgow, 13 times before setting him on fire in 2004. He fled Scotland but was eventually caged for a minimum of 25 years after being hauled back to face justice from Pakistan. Baldy and Zishan, who was locked up for 23 years, were the first ever in Scotland to be convicted of racially motivated murder. The terrified schoolboy was targeted in revenge for an attack on Baldy by a group of white men. He was taken on a 200-mile terror drive to Dundee before being returned to Glasgow, where he was butchered and torched while still alive. After a jury found them guilty of the slaughter, Judge Lord Ewist called the cold-blooded execution of Chris an abomination. Baldy has been attacked on numerous occasions by other Scottish prisoners and is hated throughout the system. Number 4 is Mark Bridger. On the 30th of May 2013, Bridger was found guilty of April Jones' abduction and murder, in addition to perverting the course of justice. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the trial judge ordering that he never be released from prison. Mark Leonard Bridger was born at the War Memorial Hospital in Carshalton, London, on the 6th of November 1965, the middle of 3 children of Pamela and policeman Graham Bridger. He has an older sister and younger brother. 28, he grew up in a semi-detached house in Wallington, London. He attended John Ruskin High School in Croydon, leaving with 7 CSEs. Bridger had a history of legal infractions. When he was 19, he was convicted of firearms offences and theft. He moved to Wales in the 1980s, and there he was convicted of criminal damage, affray, and driving without insurance in 1991. The next year, he was convicted again, for driving whilst disqualified and without insurance. In 2004, he was convicted of battery and threatening behaviour. In 2007 he would receive his 5th conviction, this time for assault. Bridger's work history is varied, having worked as an abattoir worker, hotel porter, firefighter, lifeguard, mechanic, and welder. He has 6 children by 4 women, including 2 by his wife, whom he married in 1990. On the 5th of October 2012, police officially designated the case a murder inquiry. Sky News presenter Kay Burley was accused of insensitivity after breaking the news of Jones' probable death live on air to volunteers who had been searching for her. The interviewees were unaware the case had changed from a search for a missing person into a murder inquiry. On the 6th of October, local man Mark Bridger was charged with child abduction, murder, and attempting to pervert the course of justice. He appeared before magistrates at Aberystwyth on the 8th of October, where he was additionally charged with the unlawful concealment and disposal of a body. He was remanded into custody and held at HMP Manchester pending an appearance at Carnarvon Crown Court, which occurred on the 10th of October via videolink. On the 14th of January 2013, at Mold Crown Court, Bridger pleaded not guilty to the charge of murdering Jones, but accepted that he was probably responsible for her death. The trial was to begin on the 25th of February at Mold Crown Court, but it was adjourned until the 29th of April at the request of Bridger's defence team in order to make further inquiries. The trial of Mark Bridger began on the 29th of April 2013 before Judge Mr. Justice Griffith Williams. On the 24th of May, the BBC reported that the defence case had ended, and the judge would begin to sum up the case on Tuesday the 28th of May, after the bank holiday. On the 29th of May the judge concluded his summation, and then ordered the jury to retire to consider its verdict. On the 30th of May 2013, Bridger was found guilty of abduction, murder, and perverting the course of justice. Later that day, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life tariff, having been called a pathological liar and a paedophile by the judge. After the verdict, it was revealed that Bridger had confessed to the Strangeways prison chaplain that he had disposed of April's body in the fast-flowing River Dovey, which flows past Bridger's house before terminating in the sea near Abu Dhabi. Dyfed police have said they doubt Bridger's claims and believe he scattered April's remains across the countryside near his house. In July 2013, while serving his sentence, Bridger was attacked by a fellow prisoner with an improvised shank, resulting in facial and throat injuries, for which he received stitches. In December 2013, Bridger launched an appeal against his whole life sentence, but dropped the appeal in January 2014. Number 3 is Roy Whiting. Roy William Whiting, the man found guilty of murdering Sarah Payne, was born in Horsham on 26 January 1959 and grew up in Crawley, where he lived for most of his life until he was convicted of the murder. He was one of 6 children born to George and Pamela Whiting, but 3 of his siblings died in infancy. He grew up in Langley Green, Crawley. In June 1986, he married Linda Booker. They separated before their son was born the following year and divorced in 1990. Whiting also fathered a daughter with another unnamed woman around 1990. On the 4th of March 1995, an 8-year-old girl was abducted and sexually assaulted in the Langley Green area of Crawley. Whiting was arrested several weeks later. A man who knew him came forward after hearing that the abductor's car was a red Ford Sierra, which matched the description of the car that Whiting had just sold. The vehicle was traced by police to its new owner and a knife was found hidden in it on the 23rd of June 1995. Whiting admitted charges of abduction and indecent assault, and was sentenced to 4 years in prison. The maximum sentence for the crime was life imprisonment. However, he received a lesser sentence because he had admitted to the crime at an early opportunity, although a psychiatrist who assessed Whiting after his conviction said that he was likely to re-offend once he was released. Whiting was released from prison in November 1997, having served 2 years and 5 months of his 4-year sentence, and was one of the first people in Britain to go on the sex offenders register. He had been forced to serve an extra 5 months in prison before being released on license as a penalty for refusing to participate in a sex offender rehabilitation program. Sarah Payne, who lived in Hersham, Surrey, disappeared on the evening of 1 July 2000 from a cornfield near the home of her grandfather, Terence Payne, and his second wife Leslie, in Kingston Gorse, West Sussex, England. Payne had been playing with her 2 brothers, aged 13 and 11 at the time, and younger sister, aged 5, when she disappeared. A police search of the local area commenced, and quickly transformed into a nationwide search and national news story, with members of the Payne family, mostly her parents Michael and Sarah, making numerous television and newspaper appeals for her safe return. On the evening of 2 July 2000, officers from Sussex Police first visited Roy Whiting at his seafront flat in Littlehampton as part of their inquiries into Sarah Payne's disappearance. A number of other suspects, particularly convicted sex offenders, were also questioned and at least one other person was arrested. Police officers and numerous volunteers scoured the area around Littlehampton for clues to Sarah's disappearance, and her family made daily appeals on national television news for help in finding her. On the 10th of July, police announced that they had received information regarding the sighting of a girl who matched Sarah's description at Knutsford services on the M6 motorway in Cheshire on the morning after her disappearance. 3 days later, Michael and Sarah Payne were warned by police to prepare for the worst, explaining that the emphasis of their inquiries had shifted and that there was a possibility that the daughter might not be found safe and well. On the 17th of July, a body was found in a field near Pulborough, West Sussex, some 15 miles from Kingston Gorse where Sarah Payne had disappeared. The next day, Sussex police confirmed that the body had been identified as that of Sarah Payne, and a murder investigation commenced. On the 6th of February 2001, Whiting appeared at Lewes Crown Court charged with abduction and murder. Whiting pleaded not guilty to both charges and was remanded in custody while still serving his sentence for the motoring offences, but the new charges against him prevented his release from prison during the summer of that year. On the 12th of December 2001, after a 4-week trial before Mr. Justice Curtis and a jury, Whiting was convicted of the abduction and murder of Payne and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The trial judge said it was a rare case in which a life sentence should mean life. Whiting has been attacked on numerous occasions and in one assault had his eye took out, meaning he is one of the most hated prisoners in the UK. Number 2 is Levi Bellfield. Levi Bellfield, born Levi Roberts, the 17th of May 1968, is an English serial killer, sex offender, rapist, kidnapper, and burglar. He was found guilty on the 25th of February 2008, of the murders of Marsha McDonnell and Amelie Delagrang and the attempted murder of Kate Sheedy, and sentenced to life imprisonment on the 23rd of June 2011, Bellfield was further found guilty of the murder of Millie Dowler on both occasions. The judge imposed a whole life order, meaning that Bellfield will serve the sentence without the possibility of parole. Bellfield is the only prisoner in history to have received 2 whole life orders. Bellfield was found guilty of the murders of McDonnell and Delagrange, as well as the attempted murder of Sheedy, on the 25th of February 2008, more than 3 years after the last of the 3 attacks. The following day, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with a whole life order. Bellfield was not in court to hear his sentence, as he had refused to attend court owing to unfair press coverage following his conviction. On the 30th of March 2010, Bellfield was charged with Dowler's abduction and murder, predating the earliest of the other 3 charges by almost a year. He was named as the prime suspect in connection with the murder in the immediate aftermath of his first trial in 2008. As a result, the inquest into Dowler's death was adjourned. On the 6th of October 2010, he appeared in court via video link and was formally charged with 1 count each of attempted abduction, actual abduction and murder. Bellfield's second trial began at the Old Bailey on the 10th of May 2011, and on the 23rd of June the jury found Bellfield guilty. He was again sentenced to life imprisonment the following day, and the trial judge once again imposed a whole life order. The trial of Bellfield on another charge, that of the attempted abduction of an 11-year-old girl who was offered a lift in the Walton area by a man in a red car on the day preceding this murder, was abandoned due to newspapers publishing prejudicial material. On the 27th of January 2016, Surrey police announced that Bellfield had admitted, for the first time, abducting, raping and murdering Dowler after being interviewed about whether he had an accomplice. Bellfield later issued a denial that he made any such confession, but Surrey police stood by their earlier statement. Bellfield is imprisoned in Home Prison Franklin, where he will spend the rest of his life. He is hated by the other prisoners and has been attacked on numerous occasions. The number 1 most hated prisoner is Ian Huntley. School caretaker Huntley killed Jessica Chapman and Holly Wells, both aged just 10, after luring them into his home. He was later imprisoned for life with a minimum term of 40 years. The Soham murders were a double child murder committed in Soham, Cambridgeshire, England on the 4th of August 2002. The victims were 2 10-year-old girls, Holly Marie Wells and Jessica Amy Chapman, who were lured into the home of a local resident and school caretaker, Ian Kevin Huntley, who subsequently murdered the children, likely via asphyxiation, before disposing of their bodies in an irrigation ditch close to Raff Lakenheath in Suffolk. The girls' bodies were discovered on the 17th of August 2002. Huntley was convicted of the murder of both girls on the 17th of December 2003 and sentenced to 2 terms of life imprisonment, with the High Court later imposing a minimum term of 40 years. His girlfriend, Maxine Ann Carr, the girls' teaching assistant, had knowingly provided Huntley with a false alibi. She received a 3.5-year prison sentence for conspiring with Huntley to pervert the course of justice. The search for Holly and Jessica in the 13 days of the disappearance has been described as one of the most intense and extensive in British criminal history. Having discovered the children's clothes at Soham Village College, police decided to arrest Huntley and Carr. Both were arrested on suspicion of abduction and murder at 4:30 a.m. on the 17th of August. Investigators had stated on the 7th of August they strongly believed the children had been abducted, and announced their strong suspicions that both girls had been murdered on this date. During initial questioning, Huntley refused to answer questions and appeared evasive, confused, and emotionally detached, occasionally drooling during police attempts to question him in an effort to feign mental illness. This left police with no option but to refer Huntley to a mental hospital to undergo an extensive psychological evaluation. By contrast, Carr quickly confessed to detectives she had lied about her whereabouts and her partner's actions on the 4th of August, as, shortly before she had returned to Soham from Grimsby 3 days later, Huntley had claimed to her in a phone call to have seen the 2 girls shortly before the disappearance, admitting, "The thing is, Maxine, they came in our house." According to Carr, Huntley then informed her the children had entered their home in order that Wells could stanch her nosebleed. He then claimed to her Chapman had sat on their bed as he had helped Wells control the bleeding from her nose before both girls had left their home. Referencing one of the 1998 rapes he had committed but had earlier claimed to her to have been falsely accused of in this phone call, Huntley then began voicing concerns as to again being falsely accused of involvement on this occasion, also claiming his previous arrest had caused him to suffer a nervous breakdown. She had therefore later agreed to concoct a false story with her partner to support his version of events. After being informed of the discovery of the children's bodies and the evidence of Huntley's guilt, including his fingerprints being recovered from the bin in which the children's clothes had been found, Carr burst into tears, shouting, "No. He can't have been. It can't have been. He hasn't done it." Despite these revelations, Carr initially remained emotionally attached to Huntley and professed her belief in his innocence to both the police and her family. By the 20th of August, investigators had established sufficient physical evidence from Huntley's home, vehicle and Soham Village College to charge him with 2 counts of murder. He was charged with these offences while detained for observation at Rampton Secure Hospital in Nottinghamshire, and all preliminary hearings against him were postponed until the conclusion of his mental health assessment. The jury deliberated for 4 days before reaching their verdicts against both defendants. On the 17th of December 2003, they returned a majority verdict of guilty on 2 counts of murder against Huntley. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with a minimum term of imprisonment to be imposed by the Lord Chief Justice at a later date. Huntley's face showed no emotion as the verdict was announced. The mothers of both Wells and Chapman burst into tears. On the 29th of September 2005, High Court Judge Mr. Justice Moses announced that Huntley must remain in prison until he had served a minimum of 40 years imprisonment, a term which would not allow parole eligibility until 2042, by which time he would be 68 years old. In setting this minimum term of imprisonment, Mr. Justice Moses stated, "The order I make offers little or no hope of the defendant's eventual release." Huntley avoided eligibility for a whole life tariff as the passing of the Criminal Justice Act 2003 had been 1 day after his conviction, thus taking effect on the 18th of December 2003 and applying solely to murders committed on or after this date. Huntley has been attacked on numerous occasions and is the most hated prisoner in the UK.